About games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
and we're gonna talk a little bit. I shouldn't have us on sound in the other window. Anyway, today we're gonna talk a little bit about some more MCU um movies, because that's all we do now. This is an MCU podcast forever and
This is a fucking
always.
MCU. Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Movies that we have already talked about, actually. Every
yeah.
single one of them.
Well, I mean, at this point, right? The early half we didn't, but yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about the third part of the Phase 3, which is Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain Marvel. Um, and these are movies you've probably seen them, so let's just get into it. So Infinity. Oh, spoilers for all these. Spoilers for all these. Infinity War.
Yeah, so I actually watched these out of order by accident. I just, for some reason, got it in my head that Captain Marvel was the next one in the series. Because I remember it being early in the year, but I was like, oh, but Infinity War was a summer movie, but it came out the next year. So I watched Captain Marvel, Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp by mistake. But I have like a million thoughts about Infinity War. Overall, my opinion of Infinity War is pretty bad. I do not think this movie has aged very well. And in fact, the time since it has come out, and watching all of these movies in like a gigantic chunk, Infinity War is actually like truly bad in my opinion. Like quality wise, a lot of the time, I always like kind of qualify this like it's not my thing, but I think it's fine, right? Like it does stuff that gets on my nerves maybe, but it doesn't have like core fundamental mistakes in like the storytelling or like flaws in like the storytelling. Infinity War absolutely has those, and it was glaring, this time around. Like maybe because we're watching them in like order, maybe because like the kind of mystery hype has died down and is like gone. But just for some reason, I just watched Infinity War and I was like, wow, this is like a bad movie actually. And the funny thing is that I actually still kind of like it. I think I something I said a long time ago was that as an action movie, I might be able to just get into it, right? Because a lot of the times this happens where like if the action is good and like gripping, that I can just rewatch something even if it's like not so great. Like so for instance, I don't think the Hobbit movies are particularly good, but I can watch them end to end easily because I just think the action is compelling. And it's just like an easy thing to kind of like draw my eye and my attention. And Infinity War absolutely has that quality. Also, I actually think the storytelling is like legitimately ambitious. I think a lot of my feelings at the time kind of got muddled in that conversation around like, oh, Thanos is the hero of the story or whatever, which is obviously not true.
Yeah.
But he is the protagonist of the story, and it does have pretty interesting and unique story structure for for a film, especially like this gigantic, like mainstream sort of like blockbuster film. And so it doesn't and it has all these other problems obviously that are like real substantive problems. But I have to weirdly kind of give it that extra credit because there is stuff in here that is good that I missed the first time, and there's stuff in here that is bad that is woefully terrible. So
Yeah. So
there.
from my perspective, I don't think I had the same kind of like reaction that you did, like the kind of back reaction. But I also it also fell in my eyes a bit. Um, Something in particular that hit me this time around. Like, so I basically find it to be serviceable, but like not as good as I remember it being, and also like whatever. The thing that really bothered me this time, and maybe I should start cursing you for cursing me with realizing this, but like the Marvel humor just like really grated on me this time around. Like the whole Doctor Strange Tony Stark interchange, like just like I said last time that the Hulk crashing into the bridge is the worst moment of Marvel humor. I think it might actually be better than the whole Ben and Jerry's interaction that happens like at the beginning of the movie. Just like I was just like, really? They like I had to go back and watch again to like you know, just in terms of like tense things are happening and they go on this like dumb diversion because like at least the Hulk slamming into the bridge had some slapstick value. I don't think it was even like funny in like like a normal sense.
I agree with that, actually, to be honest. I mean, I actually think the Marvel humor in a lot of this was basically fine. I still think Doctor Strange is the worst offender when it comes to just like really bad Marvel humor, really like ruining the tough moments. Um, but like like there's a lot of like offhand references, like when Star Lord calls him Grimace, or when Tony calls the guy Squidward. Those moments grated on me the first time I remember, but now they're just kind of in stride because like you know it's just like superheroes saying one-liners. That
Yeah.
stuff is like fine, but there are a couple of moments in the narrative where like these little needly exchanges pop up that just like make me want to shoot myself.
Yeah, and so to that point, I think I do agree with you that a lot of it works. I think the problem with a lot of the Marvel humor is that not that like it's always bad, it's that like there is so much of it that some of them are just bound to miss. Right? Like the way I think of it is like, there are some people who will tell you 10,000 jokes, and like a lot of them, and like some of them are bound to land, right? Like
Yeah,
so um
Archer theory is what we call that. And I think that's a Mark Rosewater term,
oh,
actually.
is it?
Yeah, he coined it. There was a while where I read his weekly blogs when I was like really deep into MTG, and Archer theory is the idea that like if you shoot enough arrows, eventually you'll get a bullseye. Uh, so I do think that's like that's I guess that's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Marvel humor grade on you, but like what else? What are some of your other thoughts?
Yeah. So, what else? It just feels like very kind of like I don't think the storylines kind of meld well. Um, and this is very nitpicky, but the thing that like really stood out to me this time is the Wakandans all lining up and like throwing these like high tech spear like energy spears, and then Bucky standing there with like a normal ass gun. I burst out laughing, and I'm not supposed to, but I was like sitting like obviously not a big thing, but a thing that just like stuck out in my mind is kind of
Yeah,
being like,
this is another one of those moments where Aquaman has ruined me for this kind of thing. In the same way that just like the battle at the end of Black Panther just felt like this tiny skirmish compared to the end of Aquaman. Even this felt like
yeah,
tiny in comparison. It's just like a handful of Wakandan guys and these alien space doggos, which also controversial opinion, the space dogs kind of suck. Um it just felt weirdly small. Though I do in general like that big battle in the same way that I like it before, because so it does the thing where it's using people's powers in like fun and compelling
mm,
ways. Especially on Titan, this happens with like Doctor Strange making little platforms for Star Lord to jump, and Star Lord drops a thing, and they're zipping through Doctor Strange's portals. You can tell that they really like nailed that one. I mean, the Wakanda stuff is just kind of like everybody gets their little moment of like, oh well, War Machine flies in and he bombs some guys, and then also Falcon bombs these guys. But in general, I don't have a lot of complaints when it comes to the action in this film.
yeah. No, I think to your point though, like the scale thing, I think it's just hard to do scale in like a superhero. Like it works in Aquaman because he's got an army there that doesn't have to be Aquaman. When like the
Yeah.
main draw of your force is supposed to be these like under two handfuls of guys, right? Like, um, then I just don't think you can. I don't think you can pump the scale up that much without it. Like, because
I also think Aquaman dedicated to the world building in such that like
yeah,
the Brine Kingdom, you don't even have to know, you don't meet the Brine King really. He has like one line where he tells Orm to like go eat a dick. And like like that's just kind of evocative in and of itself, and you just like see a sweeping shot of these siege crabs lobbing lava or whatever, and you're just like, "Oh, like it suggests so much more, right?"
yeah,
It kind of suggests this like whole military, whatever. That I don't get that same sense out of I don't get that same sense out of like Wakanda, or for that matter out of like Thanos's guys. It is all very personal. The most interesting part of Thanos's guys is his like little fucking lieutenants that have like, you got the one guy with the big hook and he's like Hulk and he pumps people, and then you got Squidward obviously who's telekinetic and shit like that. So
yeah, yeah. I also forgot like how like not I felt like this like squad of of these four kind of like lieutenants, I guess, of the Chitauri army, right? Like it felt like I remember thinking they might be interesting in Endgame, and they're not interesting in Endgame. So I think this might be like backwards looking, kind of like retroactively um, bad things. But I'm actually interested to hear some of your thoughts. He says you've got, since you mentioned that you want to
Okay, so here's like my
dive into it.
nuclear take. I don't think any of the story or character stuff like really sort of like works because almost all of it is referencing shit that's like off screen, right? So the big killer this time for me was Wanda and the Vision, right? So man, I actually wrote a whole thing of this in my notes. What did I say? Man, this is actually pretty brutal. So I wrote all of these big emotional moments are failing for me, right? They're paying off things that happened just off screen, camera right, or like between films. Wanda and Vision are in love, and this sacrifice that like she has to be the one to destroy the mind gem, right? Is supposed to be this meaningful thing, but it's actually really hollow. We see a single minute of them together, and they like vaguely gestures at a relationship, but they don't actually have like a real one, right? Like they kind of pretend to this relationship because the movie just wants to get onto this fight scene in the train station or whatever. This is made even worse by Civil War, where the resolution they have at the end of that movie is entirely negative, right? They are on opposite sides of the Civil War, and Wanda legitimately fucks Vision up by, you know, like sending him through the thing or whatever. So they resolved their differences off screen, fell in love off screen, developed these deep dynamic emotional ties off screen, and then on screen I'm supposed to care about Wanda destroying the mind. Like it's completely unsupported, right? And that emotion like absolutely fell flat. But it's not just like there, right? So for instance, another example of this is the Doctor Strange Tony stuff, where it seems to be suggesting that like Doctor Strange is just like not taking Tony or the Avengers like seriously at all. And he says that line where he's like, well, listen, if it's between you or the kid or the time gem, I'm choosing the fucking time gem. And at the very end, when he gives the time gem over to like save Tony's life, it's supposed to be like a meaningful, right? Like it's supposed to be like a meaningful moment. But because the movie is so fast, they don't actually ever have any kind of come to Jesus moment where
Yeah,
like Doctor Strange and Tony Stark are like, you know what? You really gave him a good how do you do? You're all right, Doctor Strange. You know, like there's no resolution there. So it's kind of like unsupported, except for the just plot mechanics of Doctor Strange happened to see the future. And so in that instance, it's not an emotional decision at all. It's purely calculated. And in every other scenario, you can assume that Doctor Strange would absolutely have sacrificed both Tony and Spider-Man without a second thought or whatever. It's just like all of that kind of combines into this just like very frustrating like like feeling. It's kind of like I'm sitting down at my friend's house and my friend is like, oh my god, I have to show you the funniest YouTube video of all time, right? And they put it on and it's like going, but you don't find it funny at all, and they keep looking at you like to see if you're laughing. You know what I mean? I feel like the movie keeps looking at me to be like, are you crying yet? Do you see what Wanda's gonna blow up the Mind Stone? She loves the Vision. And I'm just like, no, I don't. That's just not a real thing. So that's kind of like one big piece of it. I think that's really bad and really destroys kind of a lot of the character stuff in the movie. The other piece of this is that this movie is relentless and miserable. Like, oh my god, it is just it feels almost hateful. Like angrily personally trying to cause you grief almost. It's like every possible thing that happens in such a way that it is just like brutal. And I just like I really reacted negatively to that tone. I don't know if it's like 2020, like maybe I'm just like not emotionally into this. And it's like it's weird because I like that. You know, people complain about movies that are also like this, and I love those movies, right? Like I want the stakes to be higher. I want the drama to be like really tense or whatever, but it's just like, man, nobody can catch a fucking break in this movie. And it just feels like it's the heightened version of what I complained about when we were talking about Civil War, right? Where it's like the, you know, the building blocks that were set up in the Avengers and Ultron were kind of being like knocked over, right? And we were supposed to sort of feel this catharsis or whatever. It was supposed to kind of like create this like oh moment in the audience to be like knocking this stuff down. And this is just like the more aggressive, more mean-spirited sort of like version of that. If you ever like enjoyed the Guardians of the Galaxy, if you ever enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, even if you enjoyed, I kind of forgot how bad it turns out just for basically everyone in this movie. And I guess that's kind of the point, right? Like it
Yeah.
is a tragedy in that sort of sense. But it just feels like it kind of feels like the end of Game of Thrones for me in that way, where it's just kind of like it's like just sort of designed to piss
Yeah.
me off rather than like naturally occurring out of the characters. Though I will say there was one exception to that, one exception, which is Star-Lord shooting Gamora with the gun I don't think it works the second time when he bops Thanos in the face. It didn't work for me the first time, it didn't work for me here. But there was like I could really feel it when Star-Lord had to shoot Gamora and it's like bubbles. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, that one's real. And the thing that sucks about that one, by the way, is that it's like paying off all this shit that gets done in the Guardians movies and blows that up. I
No,
really don't like it.
so I disagree with you a little bit. I appreciate I appreciate Star-Lord like losing it at Thanos more because it like, I think that is something that's like paid off, like that gets built too properly
To be
in
clear, he is not the problem there. The problem there is the contrivance of the Gamora stuff. I actually kind of
Okay.
had this backwards in my mind, where I also thought it was him, but he's kind of the end of a chain of just stuff that's like, wait, Gamora, and then Nebula is like, oh, Gamora, and they have this whole back and forth, which is just them putting together the plot. The plot moment of Thanos has killed Gamora off screen somewhere, right? And we need to inform Chris Pratt so that he like freaks out about it. It is authentic for Star-Lord to freak out about it. It's just like the mechanics of them telling him is just it doesn't work. I think it's just way too. I guess maybe because I've seen this moment. It doesn't feel like it's building to something natural. It feels like it's building to something for the purposes of
Okay, I see what you're saying.
creating this losing drama.
Yeah, I will say I do think that the Spider-Man dying works. Like I think that they like they worked hard to put in the kind of like, and Spider-Man and Tony have like a dad-son relationship in that kind of way. So I think I think I generally agree with you. Like in general in the Marvel universe, they don't put in the work they need to make the relationships really sing so that those emotional moments hit the way they were. They feel kind of cheap, but I think that the Peter Parker moment works, and I think the Star-Lord moment works.
I
But I
actually
agree with
think
you
the
on
Peter Parker
WandaVision.
moment also sort of like it doesn't work for me personally because I never really connect to either of those characters. But I do think that it kind of like works in the abstract. And again, I think this is because of the work that gets done in Spider-Man Homecoming, where
Yeah.
you do see the dad relationship, right? And if and that's kind of the thing, right? Is it's taking these moments from the other movies that are there, and it's like I don't know. It's like tearing open. It's like those other movies are wrapping Christmas presents and they're wrapping them really carefully, and this movie is just like shredding those boxes for Christmas Eve. It feels like, or on Christmas Eve. It feels like, and it's just like, I'm just very frustrated by a lot of
Okay.
this like emotional anticlimax.
So maybe I don't know. I don't know if I can agree with. It sounds like you're mad that they decided to pay off some of this stuff in Infinity War, but I think that's kind of got to be the point, right? That like a lot of these were building so they could be paid off. The fact they don't do it necessarily perfectly, I agree with you, but I can't really get mad at it, right? Like for trying to pay it off.
No, I think it's fair to like try and pay it off. I just think that the payoffs are just like all wrong. This is why I say Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day, right? Like you're supposed to open your gifts on Christmas morning, but this is a kid who's opening it on Christmas Eve when he's not supposed to, right? It's not like
Okay.
it is an unripe fruit, if you will, if I can just mix the shit out of my metaphors here. Thor also suffers from this, which honestly, this is the part that really bummed me out. I actually really liked Thor the first time, and I had very fond memories of his like little thing to go make the hammer. I remember thinking that it was like a really nice sort of downtime between all the fighting. Like here you have Rocket, Thor, and Groot just like putting like going through the motions of restarting this star, and Thor is, he's so like driven. And I remember really liking the stuff with that he says to Rocket about like, oh, what more do I have to lose, and everything along those sorts of lines. And this time that stuff also just sort of didn't work for me, which I think is just because I watched Thor Ragnarok last fucking week, and watching watching Ragnarok, which I didn't even like that much, next to this just feels so like everything that came out of that movie has just been absolutely
Yeah,
torched, which
down
sucks.
down to him losing the eye, right? Like,
That's the one that really kills me. Like, I actually don't mind the Stormbreaker. I think that's cool, right? I want him to move on from Mjolnir, and I don't think I think it's neat that he's gonna pick up this new axe hammer. Though that also fucking bothered me. They kept calling it a hammer and an axe, and obviously I know that it's the same thing. That one side of it is a hammer, the other side of it is an axe. I know the thing that they're referencing, but it's just like, if you're going to refer to it as something, just be consistent. I feel like
yeah,
that's just like a weird writing thing. Also, I have so many small nitpicks like that. One of the things that destroyed me was Chris Pratt references, I'm sorry, I keep calling him Chris Pratt. Star-Lord references that he's getting pudgy and he needs to get a Bowflex. Star-Lord would not know what a Bowflex is because he left Earth in the 80s and Bowflex came out in the 90s. Like, that's why we all know what a Bowflex is, because they put on infomercials in the 90s all the time. And it's just like, this is like the attention and detail that like really bothers me. He also makes that reference about Grimace, and I didn't look it up, but I do sort of wonder if like Happy Meals were a thing. I think they were a thing.
they were
Probably were.
Grimace has been around for a while. I think originally he also like 8 kids. So like he got to make over at some point. But
the Bowflex thing really caught me because like it's just like, especially because it's something I was paying attention to in the Guardians movies. Like, I realized it in Guardians 2 when he talks about Cheers, and I was like, what a dated reference, you know what I mean, for like kids or whatever. And I thought it through, and I was like, oh, well, that actually makes sense because Cheers was the biggest television show for the time when Chris Pratt would have been, when Star-Lord got abducted from Georgia, right? So his emotional touchstone would be Cheers. It would be Footloose, right? And so and I think it was just because I'm watching them all right next to each other that I'm seeing those fucking frayed lines.
yeah, no.
Ah,
So kind of we've got word from the chat that Grimace first appeared in 1971. So
thank you.
it is legitimate reference.
That
Thank
was
you, chat.
you passed this one, Kevin Feige.
So couple things. One, I think the Ragnarok thing stings the most, and I think it's actually like it should, because in timeline they happen like a week apart from each other, right? So like it should feel bad that like everything gets done immediately. It's just that the real world timelines didn't line up. But aside from that, the thing that stuck out to me is kind of like, I think like you just reminded me that like the Peter Star-Lord interaction I think works a little bit, right? Like, like I kind of enjoyed the, is Footloose still the greatest movie ever? It never was, right? Like I think that line works for me, but like most of Peter's like, remember that really old movie Alien, right? Like those are just kind of like a little too much for me. And maybe
those make me want to fucking die.
maybe that's just me being mad for feeling old. But I just don't think that it doesn't work.
That just reads incredibly inauthentic to me. I just don't think anybody talks that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a lot of little shit like this actually now that I'm looking at my notes. Like, another one, I fucking hate Nanotech Spider-Man with a passion. It's actually okay in the fight scene because he really doesn't use any of the nanotech bullshit. But there's that thing in with like the guy or whatever where he's like using the spider claws. Every time those things pop out, I just like, I hate it. I hate it so much. I also really kind of hate Nanotech Iron Man, to be honest. It just doesn't feel like Iron Man to me at that point. He's just sort of I don't know. The Iron Man's supposed to have the suit, and he shoots repulsor rays, and he does a little bit of that, which is like cool. But I just like hate this, like, oh, he nanotechs a shield, he nanotechs a this thing and that thing. I don't know. I just think that's lame. And like that stuff bothers me. I hated that Cap didn't have a fucking why do they not just give him a vibranium shield with a big old star on it. I missed the cap shield. I wanted to see it bounce around. I don't care. The physics bothered me 2 weeks ago. Now I missed it. I think all like it's just like all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like
No,
God,
I definitely agree with you. You know, it's like I remember the like, get this man a shield line, which I thought was fun, but then it's like it's not like a good shield. It's like a
yeah.
like a shitty little shield.
It's kind of a fisty thing. I hate that the Hulk doesn't come around. I remember liking that at the time because I thought it would pay off, but now I remember Endgame where another thing just gets completely resolved off screen, I
Yeah.
guess, right? Like it sets up this like, oh, what's going on with, Bruce and the Hulk? Nothing is going on.
Well, something went on. They just didn't show it on screen. Like they should have showed it
Yeah.
on screen. Like it would have made sense if there was like a Hulk movie in between where he figures that out and then it comes back in Endgame, but it doesn't, right? Like, you know,
It also just feels like he was supposed to activate it at the end. Like Hulk doesn't want to come out in this beginning fight scene or whatever. Bruce Banner's like, fine, I'll use the Hulkbuster armor. But then I was watching the fight and I was just like, this is perfect. He's up against another big strong guy. This big strong guy is like ripping the Iron Man, the Hulkbuster armor apart, right? Clearly what's going to happen, or what should happen, I guess. I knew what was going to happen. But what should happen is Bruce Banner is then revealed and he's squishy and the Hulk zoops up and he gets his fucking mojo back and beats up the other guy. And that didn't happen. I was just like, this seems not great.
So I think I'm going to disagree with you there. I think it is important for Bruce to like, be the hero for a moment, right? Like, cause he's usually not, right? Like I think it's important that like that he has a moment where he's like, fuck you, Hulk, I'll do it myself. And then he does the hero shit. And he's like, I'm a hero too, which I think the thread makes like the arc makes sense into Endgame. I just think they need to show more of it for it to be good. So I don't know, they announced WandaVision. Do you think if they go back and like explore these moments and like as like in between time periods, do you think that will retroactively make this movie better?
Probably not,
Okay.
because I don't think that kind of supplemental material will be paced well. It's sort of like, does the novelization solving plot holes of a thing, right? Make the plot holes in the thing better? I typically say no in those scenarios, though a lot of the time that happens, right? Like people talk about, plot like Last Jedi plot holes or whatever that are that in the novelization because you can change shit. They explain whatever dumb thing that people are mad about, but I don't really think that it kind of like answers the core frustration of like what's going on in the scene ever. You'll also see, I mean, I don't know, maybe WandaVision could do it because it's like a novelization is like a different version of the thing, whereas WandaVision is a new thing that might like go back and touch on the old thing, which is I guess a little bit different. So maybe, but I generally think that out of context clarifying of the thing that happened is not super valuable.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. All right. Well, we've spent a while on Infinity War. We should probably move on to
so many more Infinity War things, but this is fine. Yeah, we should move on.
Do you have anything big you want to hit before we move on? Like, yeah.
I think my real thing is I really, over the course of the last couple of weeks, I have really fallen in love with the first two Avengers movies. The more I see these other movies, the more I like those two. And the more those two feel like truly special in kind of how they create these characters, how they're interacting. I think something that really hit me this time is the interaction between Tony and Hulk, who have not seen each other for years, right? Last Tony knew, Hulk was flying off in a Quinjet into God knows where. And they're talking about this stuff with Steve, and they're talking about like they're referring to the Civil War and stuff like that. All that stuff just feels really like hollow and unnatural. It does not feel like two friends who haven't seen each other in a long time, or a friend breaking really bad news, the Avengers broke up, to another friend. It just feels like stuff they have to tick off to get to the next plot beat, which is really sad. That's the thing that really kills it.
I agree with you, and I think part of this is where the real world time actually made it work better, right? Because like I buy that there were like 2 in-universe years or whatever between Civil War and Infinity War, and when that happened in the real world, I think it worked better, right? Because like you did have that distance, and you're like, oh, this whole
Yeah.
time, which is like supposed to roughly mirror real time. So I you know that's like unfortunately a thing you can't get back. But I think that like we said, there was a lot of this stuff is unearned, and I think that's the biggest problem. Um, but yeah, so we
Yeah.
should probably move on to Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I really weirdly liked this movie. I couldn't believe it. I remember just finding. I mean, I don't think I hated it, but I just found it eminently forgettable. I couldn't name a single character or plot point that just was not Scott Lang and Hank Pym. I vaguely remembered liking the stuff with the villain, like the interactions with the villain, and I also vaguely liked the kind of like the action or whatever, but just like in general, I I all I had was those sort of like impressions in the rear view. I've never watched it. Ant-Man and the Wasp again. I saw it one time in theaters. I was like, I got everything I wanted out of this, and I was completely done. It was such a fucking palate cleanser watching this movie after Infinity War. Oh my god, I was just like, I don't know. I got swept up in it. I guess I don't think this movie does anything special. I don't think it does anything incredible or unique or innovative. It is far less ambitious than Infinity War. But it's just a good story told well, in general. I still don't quite connect to Ant-Man the character, and it's probably like a little too funny and jokey jokes. Like for me, taste wise, right? Like this is not gonna enter into any of my regular rotations, but I have absolutely no malice towards this movie, and I had a good time watching it. So I
Yep.
guess Ant-Man and the Wasp was not that bad.
So I've got some thoughts, and
Okay.
I remember disliking it but not hating it last time.
Mhm.
I've warmed up to it, and I think so. I've nailed down some things that really bother me. Like I think described last time that like it was Paul Rudd trying to play Paul Rudd playing Ant Man, and I don't think that's quite true. I think the thing that I can highlight that really bothered me is they made him too dumb, right? Like he's supposed to be like an
Mhm.
electrical engineer, and like every time something smart happens, he's like, "Oh, I'm a dopey man," right? Like, and that really bothered me.
Yeah, that actually, that is a good point. Like something I remember really enjoying about the first Ant-Man was the thing with the thumbprint, and I brought it up a couple of weeks ago where he does it in the ring and then he pulls the it's like that I like that is the legitimate interesting kind of he's thinking on his feet, he's a smart guy moment in all of it.
Yeah, and they just like they give him a couple of things, but like it's mostly he's just dumb and like is like good at like card magic or something, right? I think part of this is the problem, or part of this problem here is that Ant Man doesn't arc like at all, right? Like there's like a little bit of a pretense to it in the first one where it's like he's becoming a hero, but like he's never really a bad guy. In this movie, it's even worse, right? Like there's just nothing there, and I think it's fine because like what it's supposed to be, fundamentally it's Hank Pym arcing, right? Like Hank
Mhm.
Pym coming to like being less of an asshole, um, and Scott Lang's just there to be kind of like the actual moving body. Um,
He does feel really perfunctory, but interestingly, he actually feels better in this movie. I was really bothered in Ant-Man because I felt like the compelling story was like the C plot, but we were spending all this time with Scott Lang and the A plot. But he actually kind of falls by the wayside in this story, and the A plot really is the interesting, compelling stuff of let's rescue right the mom. I actually think that the weakest part of the movie is this stuff with him and Hope. I hate this
yeah,
is another between movies that all of this plot happens and you just kind of have to take their word for it or whatever. The last time we saw them, they were making out. They were happy. They were in a good spot. And then I'm supposed to learn that they're mad. They're mad at each other now. And she thinks that he betrayed her, and she's mad that she didn't get invited along to the big crossover movie. That's bad. I just think that's bad.
yeah.
Um,
I mean,
I
it's
don't
a way
know.
to put some tension back in, right? Because they need something for him to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, and like it's I buy like kind of like the small scale stakes if he potentially risks losing his daughter again. Um,
Yeah, I forgot that whole subplot, but it's great. I
yeah,
actually think it's really, really good, and it creates a lot of like tension and a lot of drama. I do
uh,
think this movie's a little overstuffed, this is a very minor point. I do think this movie is a little overstuffed. I really didn't like all this stuff with Walter Goggins as Sonny and like this criminal, whatever.
Yeah,
He's kind of
I think they need to pick one villain and run with it. Kind of.
yeah, it just feels like a I don't know, like a appendage hanging off the story that just wants to get clipped and folded into some of these other storylines that are more like straightforward and streamlined.
Yeah. No, yeah. I still think the best moment in the movie is Paul Rudd being what is it, Michelle Pfeiffer being Janet,
Mhm.
right? Like that is like I don't know, it's perfect from a Paul Rudd point of view, right? Like I don't even think he necessarily does a particularly good job of like being what Janet's supposed to be, like, or rather being like Janet in particular. He just like does like a really kind of like pretending to be a mom thing really well, and I love it. I like that scene is still my favorite. I love it. I love it so much. Um,
Yeah, I also want to highlight the music, which was surprisingly good. I normally shit on the music in these movies. Also, the music in Infinity War was basically bad, except for the Avengers theme, which is good and repeatable, I guess. And I really was surprised at how much the Ant-Man and Wasp soundtrack works. Though I do think they over rely on that one sort of core leitmotif, like the bum bum ba bum 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 ba ba. They do that all the time. And so probably, a little variety would be the spice of life. But it feels like they picked up their music game in these like back half of movies, because Black Panther and Ant-Man both had very good music.
hmm. Oh, so very, very minor point. I feel like I might have understood what it felt like to be you in sort of a sense, because this movie takes place in San Francisco, where I lived for 5 years. Um, and when they locate like the house where Eva is hiding out, it's like I walked past that spot like every day or near every day for like 3 years, and it does not look like that. Like, haha, I've gotten you, Ant Man. This is this,
It is a surreal thing seeing that kind of shit happen, because it's just like woof. I mean, we'll get to Captain Marvel, which is where it happened for me, but yeah, like that's just like a tough thing. I don't think there's anything you can do about it,
yeah.
as a filmmaker, because I don't know.
The geography doesn't always work out, right? Like the Lombard Street scene, right? Like the following the scenes around it don't
Yeah,
quite
and
make
all
sense.
of is there like a lighthouse thing? There's like a big round building. They keep using it in their establishing shots, but I was just like, we just saw this thing like 3 scenes ago.
Yeah,
But you
it's
want to tell me that like and like that just really fucked with my sense of geography, because it's like, if you keep looking at this same shot of this same building over and over again, you haven't moved.
yeah.
Like,
So it's Coit Tower, I think, is probably what you're referencing.
okay,
And that's like in the upper right section of San Francisco, near the Pier District, if I remember correctly. Um,
okay.
yeah, no, I mean like, also like, I am super surprised they didn't show they always show the Golden Gate Bridge, but they didn't show it like so. The Muir Woods, where they hide the lab, is on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like that seemed like an obvious,
They
it's
show that one triangle building. That's the another San
yeah.
Francisco
That's the
building that I was
same
thinking of.
kind of ish area as like so that so Lombard Street, like, so there's like a mountain that kind of divides like that part of the city. It's like the east side of the city, like the east edge of the city, really, and there's a bunch of business building. That's where that building is. Quick Tower's a little bit further north, if I remember correctly, and Lombard Street is on the mountain that divides the two.
Okay.
And I used to live just on the other side of that, which is
I actually did like that stuff this time around, because it did feel like it's kind of like showing, I don't know, like the Empire State Building in New York movies. It's just like it kind of roots it in not just generic city for me, I guess. So I did actually enjoy that they like went to Lombard Street and that
Mm.
pier, because I've also been to that pier, which I guess is that a like famous pier? I don't know.
So that area, there's I forget what, like, there's one that's like the more famous one, but that area is just a bunch of piers with numbers on them. So
Okay, well,
yeah,
fair enough. I maybe
it's a
maybe
very
it wasn't the
touristy
one that
area.
I've been to,
It's like a
but
super
yeah.
touristy area. Yeah.
And so, it's nice to have those sorts of signifiers, because I don't think they had them in the first Ant-Man, and it just sort of does feel like a
Yeah.
generic. It just sort of does feel like a generic city, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you. But I don't know if there's like a really a lot to talk about here, other than I just enjoyed it more.
Yeah. I
very
did not have anything more
relatively
complicated
simple
than that.
movie. You know, glad that like Lawrence Fishburne and Eva can come back at some point and like be characters, right? Like,
I just love that Lawrence Fishburne is getting work. That boy deserves it.
it did feel a little bit ass-pulley to me, like when like like Janet just cures Eva. Um, but what are you gonna do? I also will say that like I was a fan of the way they tied in the Infinity War stuff. In like the
Mhm.
post credits thing, I thought that was clever. Um, which it's important in Endgame, but we find out that later. Yeah. Um, yeah. I don't know if I have a lot deeper thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I have no more deeper thoughts than Ant-Man and the Wasp, though. It's weird that it's this far up in my rankings. I found that very strange, and I never would have guessed that
Hmm.
like this might be the big upset in my rankings that Ant-Man and the Wasp aged well.
All right. Well, Captain Marvel. Um,
So you said that this is your spicy take time. Give me your nuclear
okay.
take
So this
on that.
isn't nuclear. The nuclear stuff is I've got a potential like late breaking thought about Black Panther that will go into
Okay.
detail afterwards. The So this isn't quite spicy, but so Captain I around the time that it came out, I remember hearing someone say that Captain Marvel is an anti-stoic movie. It might have even been you that pointed me at it or said it or something, but watching it again through that lens, I think was super interesting because it's definitely true, right? Like this is a movie about embracing your emotions and rejecting rationality in a certain way, right? Like kind of very very explicitly. Um, but the thing about that's interesting is this is a space movie, right? And like for whatever reason, Marvel has decided that Cosmic Marvel takes place in the space 80s as if it were Star Wars, even though it doesn't need to, right? And the
Yeah.
Star Wars movies are very, very, very much stoic, pro-stoic movies, right? Like,
Right.
like reject your emotions, reject your hatred, and control yourself, right? So this is kind of like the big thing is like this is kind of like an anti-Star Wars movie, and I think the primary problem with it is, um, or maybe like inverse Star Wars, right? Like or uh
Okay. I'm actually very on board for this take so far.
I think the big problem with it um is that Captain Marvel herself isn't enough. Like she doesn't arc to anti stoicness, right? She is anti stoic, and she just like embraces that, and so she doesn't really develop at all, right? She just like learns to like do the things that like she was doing anyway, right? Like
Yep.
and stop fighting it.
This is the exact thing. I absolutely agree. This is the exact thing I criticized last year, where I said she doesn't have an arc, which makes her
Yeah,
very boring and this story very stiff. And it's a little too caught up in its own like plot twists and turns to really be emotionally engaging. So yeah, I actually think this one is also bad. I think both Infinity War and Captain Marvel are really like the true bad Marvel movies. I would also argue Captain America: The First Avenger, but that was just like that was very like on the line. I just like Captain Marvel absolutely did not hang together for me, and I think it has a lot of structural problems, and on top of that, it has a lot of sort of surface problems too. Like a lot, like okay, you can get to the other side of structural problems. Movies I love have structural problems, but like they offer me something in return, right? So like okay, maybe Lex Luthor's plan doesn't make a lot of sense, but the movie is gorgeous and the action is shot
right.
really well, or it's attacking really interesting and complex themes or whatever. Captain Marvel has zero of any of that. In fact, it is the worst of, and the Marvel movies are typically bad at action. It is the worst at action because all she does is shoot fucking lasers. Like, something I said about the Hulk Buster scene is that might be the best fight scene in all of Marvel, right? Because it does that thing where you're constant like a new thing keeps constantly happening, right? Like, oh well, first Tony is repulsor rays, but then he brings the clink 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 thing down, and then he's grabbing the Hulk's arm or whatever. It just like keeps one upping, and you get to watch all of like your favorite guys do their cool stuff, right? It feels like I have two action figures in my hand, I'm banging them together. Imagination time, right? Captain Marvel just has absolutely no imagination at all. Its version of imagination is she shoots lasers That's it. That's the whole thing. She points her fist at a thing. Lasers come out. There's like small flashes of like something more interesting or dynamic. Like for instance, when she has her hands she can't actually laser things. Kind of. That's like C minus action work, I guess. And then there's also the thing with Nick Fury, which has nothing to do with Captain Marvel at all, which is just him doing hand to hand. I would call it serviceable,
Yeah, well, I mean,
serviceable shoes, right?
Sam
Action film
Jackson is an
making.
old man that like they de-aged in the movie, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So just like it, the core of this movie is too rigid and you can't connect to it. And then it has absolutely nothing else going on for it besides that. The only thing it does is plot twists, which I would actually argue those plot twists are bad almost. Because like the thing that makes a plot twist good, right, is your ability to go back and be like, oh, I should have seen this coming, right?
right.
I had all the clues, but I didn't see how it comes together. I don't think that's how the plot twists in this movie work. You don't have all the clues. They hide a lot of information from you in order to make this shit work, which feels shitty and bad. And I just felt that it's it's not good. It's just not good. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no,
I'm specifically talking about the scrolls stuff, where you find out that actually the scrolls are just refugees. This whole time, those are some really angry refugees who are like causing a lot of civilian fucking casualties in downtown Los Angeles. Like I don't
not
know.
only that, but also like have a spaceship, right? Like, and the technology to like pick someone's brain apart, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like the very first introduction we have to these scrolls is they are like they're like stealing her memories or whatever. That seems incredibly invasive and not ethical at all. And then like later in the movie, it's like, oh wait, no, I'm actually a good guy, guys. I'm a good guy now, or whatever. And then also the thing with Dr. Lawson being Marvel, I just think all of that was not great. That one is a little bit different though, because it's just you don't have enough information to really understand what's going on at all. Like you keep getting the flashes of like, oh, there's an explosion, here's a thing or whatever, but you never actually get like a clear set of events where you can do like the dramatic reorientation of a plot twist. So it's played like a plot twist, but it's actually just you learning the information for the first time, right? Which I just also think does not
yeah,
work, does not get done.
I feel like it's just like a thing that like they try to do two things at once and it doesn't like they don't work together, right? Like you can't have
Yep.
her both not remember anything and then have the twist be that her mentor was a Kree because like you're discovering both of those facts at the same time, essentially, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's exactly my thing. And the worst part about it, and the funniest part about it for me, I guess, actually, is that the world building is really bad. Something that these Marvel movies have always been very good at is like this retroactive world building thing. Like, I mean, I shat all over Spider-Man: Homecoming last week, but Spider-Man: Homecoming does a really good job of this, where it's like, oh well, we're this secret cabal of criminals, and we're gonna make crazy stuff out of here's an Ultron arm, but we put a gun on it, so you're shooting the Ultron arm. That's actually legitimately pretty neat, legitimately pretty cool and engaging, right? Or like these, the stuff with the Chitauri in Endgame, or not Endgame, Infinity War. I actually really like that. I kind of wish that it was another. I wish that the dogs at the end were just another invasion of the Chitauri from the Avengers, because it was really cool seeing like, oh right, he invades another planet with these big space thingies and they're chomping, and Gamora is there in this flashback scene. They do the same thing in Ultron with, oh well, you go underground and there's a big chompy boy because Hydra is doing this stuff with the chompy boys. There's so much really good world building in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even in the movies that I don't really like, that Captain Marvel, for the origin story of Nick Shield, does, or Nick Shield, Nick
dude.
Fury does none of it. It's just like Coulson is a nice guy. Nick Fury gets his eye scratched out by a cat, and it's funny.
Yeah,
It's a
it's a
joke.
flurgan. It's a flurgan,
Yeah,
buddy.
the Flarkin.
Remember that they
Shoot
make
me.
fun of the scroll for like being afraid of the cat for like you know quarter of the
It's
movie, I
like
guess.
it's like a Rick and Morty thing, or
Yeah,
like one of their like, oh, gotta get a goober or whatever. Boy, I hate it. I really hated it. So yeah, Captain Marvel both sucks, and I don't like it. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Do I have anything further to say? Like I generally agree with you on the broad strokes. It also felt like there was a lot of kind of like, remember the like 80s guys? Remember what a blockbuster was, guys? There was a blockbuster, and there were these things called VHSs, guys. Guys, do you remember? Do you remember grunge, guys? There were a bunch of those things, right? Like, yeah, do you guys remember computers had CD drives and it took time for things to load? It took seconds
Do you
for
remember what? Because she didn't go to Google. She goes to like Ask Jeeves or something, or like
yeah.
whatever the
Alta
proto
Vista,
proto.
Alta Vista.
Yeah, Alta Vista or whatever. There's just I don't know. I feel like a lot of that stuff is
I
I don't know. It's just bad.
Yeah, it's yeah. Oh, that's the other thing is I am convinced that the movie she picks up was supposed to be Top Gun, but they couldn't get the rights to it or something. Because because that's the only thing that like makes sense, right? Like,
That's true. It reminds me of the old Yeller thing with Logan. Actually, as soon as you said that, I'm immediately like, "Yep, I actually think that's the movie that they're supposed to be referencing, but they just might not have had whatever." I mean, they even call the cat Goose. I was also surprised how much I didn't like Carol in this go around. Even in just like the abject worst of these Marvel movies, I typically am just like, you know what? They found a competent actor to sell me on this character, right? Most Marvel superheroes are just not very complex people. That's fine. Superheroes are archetypal. They are mythic. They're larger than life. Like they don't have to be like deep and complex. But Kara really does kind of come off as a piece of shit. And I don't buy her relationship with absolutely anybody except for Nick Fury. She doesn't work with that little kid. She doesn't work with her own best friend. And she really doesn't work with the villain of the movie, like Jude Law, his whole thing, which I just hated. I just hated all that stuff.
yeah, so
The only person she has like real banter with is Nick Fury, and I feel like Nick Fury could have good fucking banter with like an empty coffee cup. Like I think that's him, honestly.
so you reminded me of something I wanted to bring up, which is that we've got, just comparing this to Ant-Man, right? We've got two characters that don't really arc, right? We've got Scott Lang and we've got Captain Marvel. The thing is, the fundamental difference here is that Scott Lang is just kind of like fundamentally a decent guy, like that you can't really like have a problem with. Like at worst, he's just kind of like kind of derelict in his duties sometimes, right? Like, and he's kind of maybe a little bit lazy. Captain Marvel is kind of an asshole, and like you need to either like you need to take her down, like the arc is usually her being taken down a peg, right? Like while still keeping her edge for like the stuff that doesn't happen, right? Like, and like I said before, because like she, in order for this anti-stoic line to like storyline to work, really, I think she needed to start out as like being a lot more stoic and like break out of it, right? Like almost like how this would be like a Gamora storyline, right? Like Gamora loosening up and like learning to like trust her emotions or whatever. Uh, I just don't. It just doesn't work. For the theme that they want to accomplish. I kind of like. I think the idea is interesting, right? Like the kind of like rejection of like like kind of like that military almost mindset of being controlled. Don't let your emotions rule you type of thing. I think that's like an interesting thing to reject, but I just don't think it's done well here. I think it's done incredibly poorly.
Oh yeah, I also forgot about the weirdness with the military, and it is I don't want to be. I don't like being this person or whatever, but like this movie is very weird from that perspective of the movie is like, boo, this evil empire is like persecuting like refugees with their like hyper militarized society or whatever. You know who can stop them? The American Air Force. Like, boy, that was weird. And I like, and it's I don't know, man. I think the subject of the military in movies is really complex, and people boil it down to like kind of hot takes of like, did you know that America is the evil empire, in ways that I think is reductive and bad, and it's bad, right?
Yeah,
But like,
there are two military hot takes in movies, and one of them is either America paid for something and therefore they're bad, or China paid for something and they're bad, right? Like, so
it's like, for instance, I think that there are movies where you can have like the military in positive sort of situations, right? In Man of Steel, the army is sort of the avatar for humanity, right, versus the Kryptonians, and it is about Superman and the army have to work together, and he needs to bond together with humanity. But like because they sort of fill this metaphorical role, like it's fine and it works. Or like Saving Private Ryan, where the Americans are the good guys, the Nazis are the bad guys, right? Or really any World War II movie for that matter,
Right.
where the Americans are the good guys, the Nazis are the bad guys. Or you could do the anti-war thing. The Vietnam War is very commonly, right, like in film, sort of the anti-war war that you are depicting. And so I think that like the role of military in our culture can morph into a bunch of different things. You can have Saving Private Ryan, which is a great movie about these good soldiers doing their heroic duty, and you can put that right next to Full Metal Jacket, which is
Right.
just about like, yep, we're turning these young people into psychopaths, and it's terrible and it's awful, and they're both great, films or whatever. You cannot do the boy, this evil empire is just so shitty and they're so bad to these refugees. And then your plot twist is bad because of all the stuff that we talked about earlier, right? And then the thing that's like cool is, oh, you know what? Being the first female pilot was great. Girl boss, like I just think,
Yeah.
boy, none of that. Oh, it's bad. It's like I don't know. It's just.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. Right. Like it's yeah. And I think to the movie's credit, it's not like it's like woo woo Air Force a lot of ways, right? They do like lob some criticism, but it's like just like not enough of substance there, like really like dig into it at all, right? Just kind of like yeah, and then the Air Force, hooray, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And the worst part about this whole thing is that like I feel bad. I feel like because like Captain Marvel has kind of taken on this touchstone in like culture wars or whatever. So there are like chuds who really hate this movie, and I hate agreeing with the chuds, but the chuds are right that this movie sucks, but probably for like the incorrect reasons, right? Like it's not it doesn't suck because Brie Larson said something dumb to a reporter or whatever. It just has major narrative flaws like bad
yep,
movies do.
yep, for sure, for sure. All right, well, we're basically at the end of the hour. Do you have anything else you want to talk about Captain Marvel before we move on?
Oh man. So yes, the Los Angeles stuff they
Oh,
do
right,
is
yeah,
so weird. It was just as weird. I have not watched it. Like so that is the building where I worked for 5 years, right? Right, like that train line that they fight on is right over there, and like there's a part where the worst part about this is actually they use 3 different locations, and I didn't realize this at the time, but it's actually okay. So Sam Jackson is on the ground, right, and he's in the car and he's looking up at the station, right. That is one station that's near my house, about a mile away from my house. Then she's fighting, right, but she's fighting in another station, which is the next station on that train line, by the way. It's like, half a mile down that train line. She's fighting at that station, not this station. And then they teleport when the train starts moving to 15 miles downtown Los Angeles. So it is like even more of a like patchwork than I realized in the first part, because I guess I just kind of like missed the signifiers in her like getting onto the train, that I was like, wait, that's not, I've been to that station before. That is not what that station looks like. That station, I think what it is that station has this art installation of like a big hand with a paper arrow or whatever, a paper plane, sorry. Um, and it's just like so obvious and unique that that I couldn't help but recognize that. I was like, oh right, that's not the one that Sam Jackson is driving to. So I don't know.
yeah,
That's my other thought about Captain
yeah.
Marvel.
All right, so we should probably do the rankings thing. Uh, you know. So what do your rankings look like now?
Okay, so at the time I did my letterbox, I had Captain Marvel as a 2-star movie. I had Infinity War. Man, where the fuck is Infinity War in this? As a 3-star movie. I had uh Ant-Man and the Wasp as a 2-star movie. So I would bump Ant-Man and the Wasp up to 3 stars. Like I said, perfectly serviceable, very reasonable. I would bump down Infinity War and Captain Marvel. I think Captain Marvel joins Captain America: The First Avenger as a 1-star movie, just that bad. And Infinity War is probably a 2-star movie, which dislike. So where it ends up in my rankings, all of these end up pretty low. Ant-Man and the Wasp ends up under Thor Ragnarok, kind of at the high end of the middle of my pack, right? So between Thor Ragnarok and Iron Man 2, Avengers Infinity War ends up under Thor and above Spider-Man Homecoming. So kind of at the bottom of the middle pack. Just before we get into the movies I think are actually, pretty not great, and I don't like them. And then Captain Marvel's all the way at the bottom, second to last, because boy, just nothing is worse than Captain America: The First Avenger. Or not worse. It just nothing bothers me on the same level that Captain America: The First Avenger just fucking gets on my nerves. So my full ranking as of this recording goes Avengers Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Captain America Winter Soldier. That's my top, these are the movies I like, right? Thor Ragnarok, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Iron Man 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor 2, Hulk, Thor. These are the movies that are mostly fine, right? Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man 3, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Captain America Civil War, Captain Marvel, and Captain America, making out that bottom bit. So that's my full ranking as of this recording.
All right. And so for me, Ant-Man and the Wasp and the Infinity War both go right under Avengers Thor 2 tie. With Ant-Man and the Wasp slightly advantage over Infinity War, and Captain Marvel goes third up from the bottom above Incredible Hulk, because nothing is worse than Iron Man 3.
Wow, yeah, man, Iron Man 3 is just like taking a pounding. I'm actually a little surprised. I think I might have guessed that Captain Marvel was worse than Iron Man 3 for you.
No, it's not worse. No, it's
Or
better.
You hate it. Yeah. Or I'm sorry. Yeah. You like it more.
Yeah, I like Captain Marvel worse than more. I like Captain Marvel more than Iron Man 3, but mostly just because I think Iron Man 3 is complete garbage. Anyway, full rankings from the top: Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Iron Man 1. This is kind of like the ones that I really like. Really like, that's the line there. Then it's Avengers: Age of Ultron, Avengers and Thor 2 tied for 9th place. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Infinity War, Captain America: The First Avenger, Civil War, Black Panther, Spider-Man, which are kind of like my goodish movies. And then we very quickly get into the bad to worst movies, which is Iron Man 2, Thor 1, Captain Marvel, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 3. At the very bottom. So
okay. Well, after this, we only have 2 more, right?
Yeah.
So it is just
Endgame
and Far From Home.
Yeah. All right, and then I'll be next week. But I think I'll save my Black Panther take for next week as well, since we'll have a little bit more time there.
So what we should do is we should do 20 minutes on those 2 movies, and then we'll do a big wrap up section, right? Where we talk about our full list.
Yeah, our lists. Any retreating thoughts that we have, like anything that occurs, like because this I'll tease, this Black Panther take occurred to me in the shower while I was thinking about the different villains. So,
okay.
So how was your week?
How was my week? I did a lot of Shadowlands, obviously. One of the nice things about Shadowlands is they have been like slowly rolling the stuff out. So like week 1, it was just like the best you could do was get into Mythic Zeros. Week 2, or the first 2 weeks, the best thing you could do was get into Mythic Zeros, right? So in WoW, you have normal dungeons, heroic dungeons, and mythic dungeons. Normal dungeons have no lockout. You can just run them all you want. Heroic dungeons have a daily lockout, so you can come back and run a heroic dungeon every day. And Mythic Zeros have a weekly lockout, right? So if you're gonna do a Mythic Zero, you can't get loot from a boss until sort of like the next week. Castle Nathria opened up, so we did a night of raiding where we got 2 bosses down, and I later pugged a third. It's just nice, honestly, cracking new bosses. I don't think that there's anything like super special about these ones, except for the second boss was really overtuned and they nerfed him the next day. And normally this would be good enough for guilds, right? Because most of the time guilds have 2 raid nights. Everybody raids Tuesday night because it's on the reset.
Right.
But then you'll do a Wednesday raid, a Thursday raid, something kind of along those lines. For us, we only do Tuesday raids, right? Our raid is 2.5 hours on Tuesday. We are, we progress, and we're gonna get ahead of the curve probably, but we are ultimately a casual raid group. So we wiped all night on Huntsman Altimore, and then we finally killed him in one of those sort of like heroic. He's at 2%. Most of the raid is wiped, and it's just like up to a couple final DPS to like eke it out or whatever, and they did, which was great. But honestly, it's just fun, I guess. And then Mythic Plus also opened up, which has been the mostly sole focus of my time since then. Has just been going in and doing Mythic Plus runs. I'm surprised at how hard it is. But this is sort of what I always wanted. When I got really hard into Mythic Plus at the end of Battle for Azeroth, it was as a heroic geared tank, right? We were already raiding. We had cleared normal. I couldn't get any more loot from normal. I was only getting upgrades out of heroic. I was picking up 470 pieces, which at the time was mythic level gear out of like weekly stuff or whatever. And then we picked up Mythic Plus, and we're running 10s and 15s or whatever. Now we're running like +2s, +3s, and we're like wiping all over the place, right? Because partially we don't know the fights, partially we don't know like these mechanics. One of the things about Mythic Plus that really trains you to do is like, where are the dangerous like mobs who are doing dangerous things in trash pulls, right? Because the dangerous trash pulls, well, that's where you're gonna have to like put your extra time and like work extra hard and all of that kind of thing. So the I just like completely lost my train of thought. So the thing with Mythic Plus is it is nice kind of running up the ladder fresh, right? Nobody has gear. Anytime something drops at the end of the dungeon, it's kind of an upgrade a lot of the time. I was pretty lucky with loot. I got a necklace, I got a ring this week, which there are a lot of people who did not do so well when it comes to stuff. But like at this point, gearing is more about the weekly chest and raiding than it is about like running these dungeons. One of the things that because they pulled out Titan Forging, because they pulled out like War Forging or whatever, the only random thing that can happen is you'll proc sockets on gear sometimes. When you get a piece of gear, it is the piece of gear, right? It'll say that way. There's no random better one that you could happen to get 6 months down the line. You're not replacing stuff very quickly. So most of it is going like a huge decision for me is going to happen tomorrow when I crack open my end of week chest and I have 4 different choices because I raided 3 bosses and then I did 10 Mythic Plus dungeons over the course of the week. The only other thing that's notable this week that happened is layers 4, 5, 6 of Torghast opened up, which are appropriately challenging and also a fucking buttload of fun. They're just an insane amount of fun, and I could not be loving Torghast more. I hope that tomorrow, when they open up the final 2 ranks, layers 7 and 8, which are like mythic Torghast essentially, that it continues to be a challenge for the rest of the expansion. I don't want Torghast to become something that's kind of just like easy and farmable. It is fun. It's fun in a way that I haven't had in WoW in a long time, where it's like really demanding of your full skill set, right? So all of your class utility, all of the special things that your class can do that other classes can't do, really kicks in Torghast. I have not had Intimidating Shout on my bar, which is a warrior move that fears like a group of enemies, right? It's kind of like Psychic Scream in a way. I haven't had that on my bar. I didn't use it at all in Battle for Azeroth because it's pretty pointless. But in Torghast, it's really useful, right? Fearing a group of enemies so that I can heal myself or whatever, or just focus on a particular target, right? That's like higher priority, and sending these sort of ads off in another direction is actually like incredibly useful. And I'm doing that kind of thing all the time. It's making me use my racials more, right? Like War Stomp is getting all kinds of use. It's I don't know, it's just fun and challenging and a good time, and I'm really interested to see what the Twisting Corridors, which opens up next week, has to offer, which is sort of the endless mode. It's not truly endless. It does end after floor 18, but it is 3 floors stacked on top of one another. So by the end of a Twisting Corridors run, you're just gonna have like an obscene amount of anima powers, which is sort of the roguelike stuff or whatever. And we'll see. I don't know. I guess I'll report it next week. So yeah, that's my week. That's what I've been up to. That's what I've been doing. What about you?
Well, I do want to call out that apparently one of our loyal chat members has pointed out that they were one of the DPS that saved your ass in the raid. So give a shout out for that.
That's true. Thank you.
So my week has two notable things. One of which is that I downloaded WoW, and I've
I saw you on because
Yeah.
I got into Discord because actually, so Illuria, who's in the chat, people who are listening to the cast, you can't hear this. But I was like scared that Mango was getting hacked because somebody was like, is Mango on right now? And I was like, oh fuck. And then I just looked at the GFC Discord and I saw that you were in there and I was just like, is that you?
It's very funny. So it hasn't really dug its claws into my chest or anything yet. So, but I'm still enjoying it. Just kind of like plodding along, looking at the story
Windwalker
stuff.
Monk is apparently very good.
Well, that's good for me then, because I'm having fun. It was interesting because like the first thing is just kind of like, I get to the first real area, which is Bastion, right? And I go like. And like I see a silver pop up, I'm like, oh boy, and like I have a little trouble with it. I'm like, oh boy, the things get hard. It's like, and then like a little while later, I realize no, the reason you're having trouble is because you've got like vastly underleveled weapons that don't do anything. So,
yeah.
So it wasn't too. It's not too bad though. It's been fun kind of walking through it. Little things that like like when you get to the scene where like the sky's been torn open, it's like, why is it Gazlo and not Gallywix as the goblin leader? And I like go down a little rabbit hole, and apparently it's like an off-screen thing where like Gallywix is like been accused of like working with Sylvanas or something, and like the people who care about the goblin lore are not very happy about it. But
Really? No, it's actually so. My understanding is that it's the opposite, which
Okay.
is that the change from Gallywix to Gazlo is great because Gallywix has always been just this gigantic piece of shit, and people are just like, "Why? He's such an asshole. Nobody likes him." So it was nice that Gazlo finally got the bump up.
So it's not the change that's the issue; it's the way they did it, which is kind of like he's like my understanding, and this is like a Reddit post because I couldn't find like a good source for it, is that like somebody accused Gallywix of being in league with Sylvanas, which is apparently like not particularly true. He's just kind of like a greedy war profiteer, and so it's like people are not happy about essentially the resolution there.
So in chat, folks are saying it is on screen, but it is small. This is true. I have actually played this scenario, but it is like locked away in a way that most people will not see. So basically, if you have a max level goblin character, you can unlock the Goblin Heritage Armor. The Heritage Armor is just like a special armor set that only certain races in the game have access to. In the Goblin Heritage Armor quest, it sort of sets up that Gallywix is essentially just being a huge piece of shit and betraying the goblin people. And then it is then resolved in a separate scene afterward. So it's kind of just like, it's like a hard piece of lore for someone to find, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, because like this popped out to me because like I walk up, it's like it's Gazlo, right? It's like they had finally put in like a model that wasn't the standard goblin model for Gallywix. Like recently, it felt like it's like who the hell is this and why is it Gazlo? Otherwise, I'll see how it goes. The bigger news, of course, is Cyberpunk came out. Cyberpunk came out. So we've got another update from chat. It also talked about outside the embassy after like the formation of the Horde Council.
So this is the resolution. So the betrayal of Gallywix essentially happens in the Goblin Heritage Armor quest.
Okay.
Where you go through a sort of scenario, and then so that's where he is the villain, he's the bad guy, right? And then afterwards, you go to the embassy, and there's a short conversation where Thrall goes up to Gallywix and is like, "Hey, Gallywix, I'm Thrall, and hey, Gazlo, I'm Thrall, and you're now the Goblin leader because Gallywix is a huge piece of shit." And Gazlo's like, Great. Fucking about time, you guys.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Um, yeah. So yeah, no, I will dig deep into the Goblin lore at some point, maybe. Um, anyway, Cyberpunk. So Cyberpunk came out, much to various and sundry fanfare, and I will say the game is fun. It is.
Okay.
It is a. I'm gonna say it's a good game, right? Like it reminds me a lot, actually, of like Fallout. In a lot of ways, I think the
Okay.
story's better. Um, but like that level of kind of like Bethesda bugs level of stuff that happens, and nothing super terrible, but things that are like distracting. I also haven't been able to get my hands on a good graphics card. I have a good graphics card for like 5 or 6 years ago, which runs the game perfectly fine. Right, I get like between like 40 and 60 frames on low settings. Um, but I have elected to put off playing the game anymore until I can get a better graphics card because I feel like that's kind of half the point of this. Like, friend of the cast, Monik, has been like sending me screenshots, and it's like this looks really pretty. It's like I look at my screen, it's like this doesn't look like that.
Well, you're doing better than the console
Oh
players.
yeah,
Holy
the
shit.
current gen console players are apparently like turbo screwed, especially like the lower end versions, like the PS normal and the Xbox One S, are just like terrible. So like so much of that they apologized publicly on Twitter and offered refunds. Like,
I was really surprised about that, but I guess I'm not that surprised about that. I do think it's. Okay, here's the question: how shitty do you think it is that they like never showed this footage of
um,
what it
ex-
played like?
extremely like
Okay.
yeah. So I am 100% positive that the reason they decided to offer refunds is because they broke all sorts of sales records with the pre-orders for this game, right? They have like smashed all sorts of records already, so it is not a problem for them to offer these refunds, right? Like if it hadn't done that, they probably wouldn't. Um,
Yeah, I think it is really tremendously shitty that this is the quality that they put out for consoles, and like everything I've seen so far for PC seems to suggest that like actually it's pretty representative for PC, right? All
yeah.
of the screenshots, all the stuff is as expected for PC, but I guess just like PCs are so much more powerful than a
Well,
PS4 and an Xbox One that is just like rough.
yeah. So
Just to
I
play
was
the
say
game.
apparently the PS5 and the Xbox Series X handle it fine, and apparently like the upper end last gen consoles, I guess the last gen now,
So
are
like PS4
acceptable.
Pro.
Yeah, PS4
Okay.
Pro and Xbox One X
God,
are
Xbox is so fucking confusing with
the
this naming
fucking names.
convention.
The best part of this, by the way, is that apparently at some point, like somebody ordered an Xbox Series X and they sent him the wrong one because they got confused, right? Like the actual retailer.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So what was the other thing I was gonna say? But yeah. So Cyberpunk, the character creation stuff is neat. Not as detailed as I would have like. Like they show up all these things, but like it's like it's not like a lot of sliders. Like you get like a lot of customization in a Bethesda game. You don't quite get that much here. You get like a bunch of different options, and ones that you don't normally see, which is like you can customize what your genitals look like and stuff like that. And that's like the big thing. But I'm actually kind of disappointed with like it's more like variations on a theme than it is like true customizability, if that makes sense. Um, and not that it's the end of the world, right? Your first person 90% of the time, it's not the end of the world. It's just not a thing that I would have preferred a little bit more control over kind of like the particulars, right? Like sliders for like face dimensions or whatever. Like I
Mhm.
said, not the end of the world though. Gunplay is fine, not particularly exceptional. Um, and I'm enjoying it from that perspective. I like it's been uh the game's been a good time, but like not like it has failed to reach expectations, but mostly because it never was going to. I still think it's a very good game, and a game that I'm happy that I got and I'm happy to play. But like for most people, I would say probably wait until it's patched, like wait 6 months or whatever. Um,
Yeah, that is generally my plan. Is I think I'm gonna wait till this patch. I mean, obviously it is just such a black hole in my life. Wow, right now, but I
yeah.
imagine that will slowly kind of like taper off as naturally the amount of shit to do just decreases over time, and And I feel like that's probably when I'm gonna like pick up Cyberpunk, because I do love these sorts of games. And I have to say that I am really there's a lot of stuff that I've been reading that makes me really hopeful. So for instance, someone was writing out a game dev that I follow was actually talking about how one of the kind of magical things about Cyberpunk is that it's the first city that feels like a real city in one of these open world RPGs. Like what typically happens in these open world RPGs is there's like a very small number of like rooms that you could like walk into, for
Right.
instance. Or you would have something like a hub world, like on Mass Effect or whatever, where it's just like you're on floors 32 and 33, but there's a gigantic city,
The
you know,
implied,
or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah, implied kind of outside the
Was it
Deus Ex also does this.
like Iron Forge
Whereas
has like 14 people in it or whatever, right? Like,
yeah. And like and Cyberpunk apparently doesn't do that. You can walk into the city and it is an actual city, and you can go into a lot of these rooms or whatever. And so in the way that a lot of these open world games are kind of about like the wilderness, right? And about simulating fun, cool shit happening kind of between like little nodes of civilization. So like Skyrim is like that, for
yeah,
instance, right? Where you're like doing these quest hubs, but then going and doing your dungeons. Um, Cyberpunk is really neat because everything is so locked to that kind of urban environment, and it's making it like a true urban open world game. I have no idea how true that is, but that's like a really promising thing. That's like something I've just never really seen before.
yeah. No, so I can definitely say it. Like you get that, right? Like if like it feels more like a city than any other game I've played. The scales obviously just still not going to quite be there, but like the environments you're playing and feel like several city blocks, at least what I've played so far. Um, uh, the only thing I would say there that I've heard and I've read about this myself, and I haven't quite seen it because I like if you're like acting like a normal game player, I think it's fine. But apparently, if you like stop and like watch things happen, apparently like people just like walk back and forth. Like apparently, like the AI for like NPCs is just like god awful in the game, like in like every way, shape, and form. Like
Well, that sucks.
like there's like the pathing is like atrocious, and like cars don't path right like at all. Like so yeah, like and that's like a thing that I expect to get patched forward in the coming months. So
Really? Okay. I feel like a lot of the time that stuff is like bedrock functionality stuff that doesn't get patched out.
mm,
Like I've definitely seen. I mean, everybody's talked about bugs in chat. You know, someone asked, "Did you guys see the penis hanging out bug?" I think that one's gonna get patched.
yeah, uh,
but um, but I would be interested to see if they do like real AI patches.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that one's yeah. I think they could, right? Like they're generally good about post game support. At least they were with The Witcher. Um, we'll see. Uh,
Yeah, I still have not done Witcher stuff, which everyone always talks about The Witcher and like how much we like The Witcher is a real touchstone, and I do feel weird that I kind of just like whiffed on The Witcher 3. I mean, every people we also talk about The Witcher 2, I guess, but I really did whiff on The Witcher 3, and I'm interested to see. I don't know what Cyberpunk looks like as my first like CD Projekt Red game.
I mean, like I said, I'm sure you'll enjoy it from like that kind of like Fallouty perspective because it's good. Yeah. So what else is there to talk about? I don't know if I did a ton else with my week. Other than just kind of like breezing through some stuff. Do I have any like movies or music?
I've been watching things. I've been watching more Sopranos, which just like feels weird in like current year watching The Sopranos. It is such a touchstone for Bush era stuff. Like they talk about terrorism constantly in that show, which like I now feels weird, but like I actually know that like at the time I also felt like it was just this very omnipresent thing, because like it starts I think in 1999, so it's like 1999 through to I'm really late in the show now. It's like season 6 or whatever, 2004 or whatever. Um, but I do have to say I really understand how and why prestige television kind of came out of here. It is definitely like certainly like in its infancy, and it gets dwarfed by the better shows, right? Like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul is kind of like Breaking Bad, or I'm sorry, is kind of like The Sopranos but better in a way, just because like the lawyer angle is like really neat. I'm surprised how little mafia shit happens in The Sopranos, but like it's kind of a family based show, if that makes sense. And so sometimes you'll get these episodes that it's like Meadow is in college and she's having drama with her boyfriend, and I'm like, what the absolute fuck? Whack somebody, like, you know what I mean? I want to talk about more gabagool, right? Um, but
I
I think one thing I want to highlight that The Sopranos is better than anybody else is dream sequences. There are a bunch of them in the show, and the first couple, I was like, are these like a fluke or whatever? And then there's an extended sequence where Tony is in a coma because he gets shot. And he doesn't even get shot doing something dramatic. He gets shot by his uncle, who is a former mobster, but is like slowly getting dementia. And and he's upstairs and Tony is downstairs, and he forgets that Tony is there, so he thinks he's being robbed, and he runs downstairs and he shoots Tony. And it's like, and this sounds like a spoiler, and it is in a certain sense like a spoiler, but it's not even like a real it's like it just happens out of like nowhere. It's not like big drama or whatever. But the dream sequences in this show are so good and true to life. You know how like sometimes in movies, like dream sequences are just like so on point. They are so on the fucking money that it's just like, that's not a real dream. In a real dream, it's just weird shit going on. That is the kind of dream sequence in The Sopranos, right? Where like there's one where Tony is driving a car, he looks to his side and he sees one of his like big lieutenants, right? He looks forward again, but now he's in the back seat of the car and his wife is driving. And then he looks at the front seat again and it's the same guy, but he's bald now. And then a caterpillar crawls up the side of his head and he wakes up. That sounds like a real fucking dream, okay? You know what I mean? Like, interpret the symbolism of this. I don't fucking know. Like, and the funny part is that he goes to his psychiatrist, right? Like, part of the basis of Sopranos is that Tony is going to a therapist, right? And he breaks down parts about his like mafia life with her or whatever, and he's explaining the dream to her like she's gonna decode it, and she's like, I don't know what. Oh God, I want more fucked up dream sequences that just don't make sense. Please, The Sopranos.
Uh, I mean, I need to get into this. Like the Sopranos memes are kind of like are making a resurgence on the Twitter sphere.
I was really surprised about that. Yeah, people are talking about Paulie over time, all the time now. Paulie Walnuts, who I later learned because I fell down a bit of a YouTube rabbit hole of like, did you know Sopranos facts? The guy who played Paulie was an actual like mobster for like a long time, and he was like in jail or whatever. And so they kind of like hired him to bring some like authenticity to the show. And there is nobody that is like more authentically like a gangster than Paulie. One of the things he does is he keeps his hands forward all the time, and he talks about it in interviews. It's something he picked up in prison because in prison you can't have like not that you can't. If you have your hands in your pockets or your hands at your sides, and something you don't want that to happen. If a prison fight breaks out, you want your hands close so that you can like fight or whatever. And I was just like, what a crazy fucking detail. But this guy spent 10 years in Sing Sing, right? So like, I guess so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're running up against the edge of time, and I don't think I've got anything else to talk about, especially more than Sopranos trivia.
I do have one more other thing. Have you
Okay.
been watching Donkey's videos recently?
Yes, I have.
I just want to highlight, if you are somebody who like has watched Donkey in the past, please just go watch a couple of his most recent videos. This bit that he's doing is fucking hilarious. I don't want to spoil it for someone who doesn't know, but it's so funny. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought that the thing that started off, I was like, this is a fluke, right? Like this is like a one-off, good joke. We're gonna go back to like normal stuff. He's in it for the long haul, you guys.
I'm only getting a little tired with it. Like yesterday's video, I was not I was like, okay, really, and I get it, but like I think that the videos are a little too long for them to like be to really resonate. Although I will say that what is it? Phil Jameson, who's like one of these very short form YouTubers, like everything's like less than a couple of minutes, put out a recent video about about video essays that I thought was brilliant. So I'll link that in the description of the episode. I'll send that along to you
Okay.
too, buddy, because I think you'll enjoy it.
Interesting. I'm on board.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's everything then. If you want to reach out to us and talk to us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you reach us at subderpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subderpsplaygames.com. Or you can get in the live chat on twitch.tv/subderpsplaygames to talk to us while we're talking. You can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and all the other places there are podcasts. And you can give to us on Patreon if you really feel like it. Don't feel obligated. There's no incentives to donating other than our undying gratitude. And what else? I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything, buddy? Also, do you want?
Nope, I don't think so.
Do you want to promote anything?
I don't really have anything. I am doing a Buddy Gets Good this week. This is the last Buddy Gets Good of the year. So tune in, have fun. Twitch.tv/Akupara Games. So next week we're doing Endgame and Spider-Man 4 From Home. So
and final thoughts.
If you want to keep up with this gigantic retrospective that we are getting in under the wire. Make sure you tune in.
Yeah, I think the what would that be, like the 27th we'll probably not do. We'll probably leave that off the holidays.
Yeah, this is probably two holidays times, and then we'll probably end up doing the derpies in January.
Yeah. All right. So that's your content. Look forward to it. But until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.